This story is for you, Chapter 5. Kian walked out into the wet weather of Cotmanhay. Quickly, he became soaked to the skin, drawing strange looks from the people he passed. A woman carrying a newspaper, couples with dogs, families going to Arena Church. All these other people had coats and umbrellas, but not Kian. He was still wearing the clothes he had worn yesterday, the clothes he had slept in, cargo trousers, t-shirt, socks, and the pumps he always wore around the house, since Eddie's dog had messed everywhere. A car passed him on Cotmanhay Road, then again on Charlotte Street. He avoided looking down at the driver and passengers, though he could feel them looking at him. Kian was cold, wet, hungry. And after a bad night's sleep because of the party, Kian felt tired, really tired. But he had nowhere to go that he could sleep. Not like this. He couldn't risk going to a friend's house. Parents would be suspicious. They would ask questions, and the last thing he needed was another visit from the social worker. All he had with him was his ruined book and whatever was in his pockets. Not money. He didn't even have £1 to buy a sandwich at the Co-op petrol station. But then he realised that there was something in his pocket, the one down by his knee. He delved in and pulled out a key. The key, the one Molly had given him. As he studied the key in his hand, the rain began to fall harder still, and a car that had slowed down when he was on Charlotte Street came past again. He walked quickly, as if he were going towards the police station. That seemed to satisfy the driver of the car, which picked up speed and drove away. That was when Kian made a decision. He'd use the key. He'd go to the bookshop. He knew it would go one of two ways. He would just sit in there safe and warm and dry, and no one would bother him. Or he'd get caught. Fine, he said out loud. Either of those outcomes was better than what he was doing now, and a whole lot better than what would happen if he went back home. When he arrived at Cherry and Hunter's bookshop, Kian walked round the back and put the key in the lock. He didn't check to see if anyone was watching. He didn't care. Turning the key, then the door handle, he darted in out of the rain and the cold. He was greeted by a waft of warm air and a nice smell, a smell like bacon. He had a weird and sudden memory of his Aunt Julie again. She used to bake. She'd let him help and lick the bowl. No alarm went off. He closed the door behind him. By the back door there was a very small kitchen area, a fridge, a kettle, a large plastic container full of scones. Kian's heart skipped a beat and he smiled. Then he rushed to the toilet. Kian made himself a cup of coffee. He'd never made a cup of coffee before, but he knew how. He'd seen the head teacher do it in his office. Boil kettle. Pour the coffee into the thing with the plunger. Water in. Wait. Press plunger. The head teacher never had milk or sugar. Kian found it exciting. He felt grown up. He would never be able to do this at home. He slurped a mouthful of the red-hot liquid. It tasted dreadful, but somehow it made him feel a bit better. Next he took a scone. It had sultanas or raisins in it. It smelled fresh. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He'd entered a building illegally with a stolen key. He was trespassing. He'd taken a scone and some coffee. He'd used their kettle and their toilet. All of this was bad. But even though he knew that, Kian had never felt so good. Kian chose one of the beanbags to lie in, where he couldn't be seen from the window. He slumped down into it, ate his scone, and finished his brew. He was surrounded by books, bright coloured books with pictures of smiling children on most of the covers. That, or funny animals. Yes, he felt good. He felt warm too and dry. He stretched his legs out and sighed. The scone was delicious, and now that he didn't need the toilet and wasn't hungry, his body had relaxed. But the best thing was that he didn't have to worry about someone coming in and spoiling this. That dog, Eddie. No crack on the window from Sean or Molly. No car following him down the street. He was safe here. He could stay all day and all night if he wanted to. Kian couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so completely happy. He burst into tears. The sob he had stopped in the kitchen was back, a building up of pressure in his lungs, like his heart was about to explode with sadness. He cried hard for a long time before he was so tired he just stopped. Then he looked at his ruined book. There was no way he could read it. All the pages were stuck together. Sneaking into the front of the shop, he saw that the table with the signed copies was gone. It took him ages to find a copy on the shelves. In the end, he found it by luck. He was staring sadly at the shelf in front of him when he simply recognised the spine. Taking the last copy off the shelf, he sat back on his beanbag. He was desperate to know what would happen next. Then he read some more. It was when the shop began to get dark and the clock on the till said 6:12 that he turned the page and found that there were only blank pages now. For a moment he was confused. Then his hand went to his mouth and his eyes filled with tears again, but happy tears this time. Kian Law laid back and grinned. He'd done something he'd never done before. He'd finished a book. The next thing Kian knew, it was light. He glanced over at the bookshop till. It said 7:53. So why was it light? Shouldn't it be dark? Kian got to his feet and gasped. He understood now. It was morning, Monday morning. He had to get out of the bookshop.